This show is sponsored by the Comics Shop. We hope you enjoy the show.
All right, good evening and welcome to another episode of Tuesday Chinwag. My name is Leigh Chalker. I'm the creator of the Australian independent comic book Battle for Bustle, which is published through Comics Studio. So Tuesday Chinwag is based on a couple of random prompting questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how. They never sort of go in that order. Things are fluid on this show. That's how we like them. It just keeps rolling and rolling. And before we introduce the guest, the best thing that you can do is like and subscribe to the channel, because with every like and subscription, that means more people get to view all of the shows that are on the Comics live streams and network. And it just helps grow the tree, the algorithm, and reach more people. And, like we get to, touch base with a bigger community. So this evening, I've been looking forward to this one. It's a gentleman that I would say, judging, from that title on his jacket there, probably knows a little thing or two about comic books. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to everyone Mr. Mal Briggs from Impact Comics. How are you, sir?
Good evening. I'm very well. That's
the way, man. That is the way. So, Mel, I'm going to before I ask you the big existential question, I'm going to tell you a little Impact comic story that came to my mind today, because I quite like NRL. I've grown up with that. So people in other states that aren't New South Wales and Queensland, that's the National Rugby League. So my favourite team is the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. And I was just going to say, there we go. We've got a Canberra Raiders supporter in the house, and my dad was a Canberra Raiders supporter, because the Chalker side of my family are from Gundagai, and most of them hang out around Canberra. And I was watching a Canterbury game last year, and suddenly, smack bang in the middle of the field was Impact Comics.
And, it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, was it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
See, Canterbury's been getting flogged for that long, man. That I track of time. It's like, another year, but this year's all right. But anyway, I digress. But Impact Comic Books was bang in the middle of the football field. And I thought to myself, that's pretty cool. You know what I mean? Because it took me to a happy place, as my team was, I think, 32-0 at that stage, and that was about 10 minutes into the first half. So as you can tell, it was a good night. But anyway, Mal Briggs, the Canberra Raiders fan, the Impact Comics man, who?
Canberra Raiders fan, Impact Comics man. Well, that's probably it, man. You've nailed me already in the intro. I've been selling comics for over 20 years now. I've been into comics since I can remember. I've been stalking Australian comics creators since the early 90s. And yeah, I don't know what I'd do if I wasn't selling comics. So I think selling comics is the who. Yeah.
That's cool. So we can get into some, some hello Alex, how are you? Go the Eels, let's go. The Eels were good last week too, mate, as they were demolished by Canterbury. So just saying, Alex. Hello Absent, hi, and to Mr. Challoner, who said g'day. Here he is. Evening, been looking forward to this one. So thank you for everyone. We do encourage comments on the show too, so please feel free if you've got any questions for Mel. I will do my best to, get you into the conversation, and Mel might be able to ask away some things that I may forget as I ramble on, just as I do. So, Mel, let's get into a little bit of crime, man. Because you already started my brain off thinking there. So you said you were like stalking Australian comic book creators, man. Now this is interesting.
In a gentle, loving way, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure they all say that. You know, like that might. Oh, sorry, sir. It was gentle. You know, like, but you know, like who was your, you know, who are the big ones that stuck out to you back in the day, mate? You know, like that you wanted to meet.
Well, the era, and I mean, as soon as I start saying names, people are going to know exactly the era. But the era that really, really cemented Aussie comics for me was Jason Paulos, Tim McEwen, Gary Challoner, Trudy Cooper, the Platinum Grit guys. I was there when Damien Shanahan was recruiting all those guys that went on to make Comic Solid. What was it called? Comicron? Can't remember it now. I made a goose of myself. Can't remember the name.
Someone out there, help him out. Tell us what this thing was.
Chris Weil. I remember seeing Chris Weil's art and early stuff, and I was just, all of these guys were just doing this, like creating stories on paper with pens, and it blew my mind. Yeah, when issue 1 comics, you know, Stan Young's issue 1 with Zero Assassin dropped, man, that was my perfect sweet spot. I'm a big sucker for dystopian cyberpunky stuff, so that really hit me in the real sweet spot. But the range of stuff that was available back then, you know, like, yeah, going from that cyberpunky stuff through the Hair But the Hippos, through the Greener Pastures and the Platinum Grit. I mean, I still couldn't tell you exactly what Platinum Grit's about, and I love every second of it. It's so yeah, all of that stuff. Yeah, it means a big deal to me, and it means so much to me that I was this high school kid, wide-eyed and surprised and scared, and meeting Gary Challoner, and oh my god, and now these are guys that I can chat with, you know, like Gary's there in the chat saying he's looking forward to this interview. Like, yeah, teenage me would be super excited about the people I know now.
Do you ever like pinch yourself, man? You know what I mean? Like, other than just right now, do you have those moments where you're like, damn, man, you know what I mean? Like, I can't believe, you know, like that I'm chatting with these people and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the opportunities I've had to do, like, yeah, I'm not changing the world or doing any amazing, expensive things or anything like that, but I'm literally in contact regularly, close friends with some of them, with people that I considered my idols as a kid. I can't imagine, being in a position that I would be more excited, especially looking back at where I came from and what excited me as a kid and where I am now. I would have difficulty being in a position where I'd be more excited about the people I know and the things I get to do. And so yeah, I definitely, living the dream.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. It's always nice to hear someone that you know, like is in a good path and happy and stuff like that. Like I could tell from just meeting you in the pre-show that you were a happy dude, like, and relaxed, and, you know, like and chilled out. And I was like, yeah, you know, like that's what we like, you know, that's what I like. I mean, I'm not suggesting there's anyone else in this room, you know what I mean? There is Lloyd and Izzy, but, you know, like, do you really class dogs as people? Some people do, some people do not. And that's the question that only you can, you know, the viewers and we can answer ourselves. I'd also just like to give a shout out to Mel's little child out there that's watching away on, you know, like her little iPad there you go. And thank you for watching. It's very nice to have you on, have your dad on, and have you watching. So thank you very much. Yeah, man, it's where, like, so you're in Canberra, Impact Comics in Canberra. You're local Canberra boy, or you come from around the Riverina area?
Yeah. I grew up in the Riverina area. I came from Harden Murrumbara, so, and then spent a couple of years in Cootamundra. It seemed like I was Canberra to me was big enough smoke that I got excited about it, but not. I liked visiting Sydney and stuff because it had that. It was just a bigger machine, but I didn't enjoy the size of it too much. I think, and I think there was a certain element around Canberra, some of the architecture and that it has a low-rise Star Trek-y sort of quality. You know, you'd always watch Next Gen and everything sort of beige and certain angles, and nothing seems to be more than 2 or 3 stories high, and there's nice gardens and everything, and Canberra had all of that. Like, it really felt like what the 90s thought like the ideal future would look like, you know. And I think it imprinted in my brain somewhere. And so yeah, and because, you know, I grew up an hour and a half away, things like the weather doesn't bother me. People love to have a big complaint about it, and but it's good, you know. We're 2 hours to the snow, 2 hours to the beach, not far to Sydney, not far to Melbourne. Like, we're in the middle of everything. And it is like a big country town. Sometimes you get to know everyone who's around and see the same faces.
Oh, you would, man. Yeah, you would. Like, I've spent quite a lot of time in Canberra over the years. Not as much time as I would have liked. I do enjoy that area of Australia. Obviously, because my dad grew up in Gundagai, and I've spent a lot of time in Gundagai, and Canberra's where, you know, like, the family seems to spread to, like much like yourself, you know, like, but you know, like, on a weird note, Mel, so when you're growing up in Cootamundra, was the Cootamundra Waddle your friend, mate, or was that just a John Williams fib? You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, that's the thing. I sort of just went to Cootamundra for the last 2 years to finish school, so I was still playing football for the Harden Hawks and that sort of thing. So while I have Cootamundra school friends and I have friends now, like, I can't truly call myself a Cootamundra, and I have no right staking a claim to the Acacia Baileyana or Donald Bradman, like the rest of everyone from Cootamundra does, like to stir up people from Bowral. So
the old town rivalries down there, you know. But I always liked down that way too, because it's like, from where I am up in North Queensland, like, the closest there's 3, north, south, and west, and you got to travel like an hour up and down, or an hour and a half. So, like, you're pretty isolated, you know. Like, when I used to travel around down there with the folks, and, you know, even by myself when I've been down on road trips and stuff, you know, it used to be like, you know, you get in the car, you'd fill her up, you know, like, you'd be like, I'm going to head here. You'd light a cigarette, and before you finish the cigarette, man, you're already in the next town. It was like, oh, okay. Like, I was expecting a little bit of a longer journey, you know. Like, there's a lot of cool places down there. Lovely area, man. It's a good spot. But so when you went, did you go to Canberra for, like, university or something, or you just went there for the big smoke, you know? Like, this is where
university was
Yeah, right. What did you study at university, man?
How to open a keg.
That's been handy over the years. I guess that's helped. That's helped with some.
So I was enrolled in at commerce. I was studying to be an accountant,
Yeah.
and yeah, I didn't enjoy that at all. I would sit in the workshop classes, and I mean, this is early 90s, right? So there's no the computer element of accounting side of things was very rudimentary. It was back then, and even first year you virtually don't even touch them. And I was sitting in the workshops, and I was like, nobody's doodling. Everybody's just doing the numbers. I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. And yeah, and so that didn't last. So yeah, I went on and did industrial design.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But didn't finish that. Did a little bit of graphic design. Yeah, not finishing industrial design really upsets me a bit, because I can distinctly recall the moment in a lecture where I looked around and everybody was doodling in their pads, and I was like, I'm in the right place. I've found my people, you know. But yeah, you know, things get weird, and life changes, and you know, you have to take on a job that's taken up too much of your time. You start missing handing in assignments or whatever, and you just sort of pivot, and yeah, eventually ended up giving up on chasing further education and just rolling from job to job, and until I hit a point where I was like, no, I'm gonna work out how to sell comics and direct myself there.
Yeah. So you never, with your you mentioned doodling a lot. You never tried pushing on with your artwork or your writing when you were younger through your uni days and stuff. You know, like
I still draw now.
do you?
Well, I don't find time to draw. Just wondering if I had anything new. No, I don't know that I do. Yeah, there's actually an 8-page comic strip that I'm 2 years behind on the art on. So,
Tell us more.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's not my script to talk about, but yeah, basically, yeah. Look, when I was at school, I studied top level art, top level math, and I confused all the career advisors, and they didn't know what to do with me, and that's why they sent me to accounting.
Okay.
Well, the big ironic thing out of that, right, is I sat in that first year of accounting and said that I'd never do this as a job, but that's exactly what I do now. That's nearly all of my time, and I don't draw because I'm sitting doing accounting and staring at spreadsheets and balancing bank accounts and stuff. And you know, that's what retail is. Like, a lot of people think a comic shop is all sitting around and reading comic books and being snarky to people, but you know.
Yeah, what was that show? Was it Clerks? Not Clerks. What was that one where the dude who played back in the early 2000s, Jason Leigh, was it? I think his name was, and he played he was in one of those Kevin Smith comic book shop movies, wasn't he? And he was the tracer, you know, like, as he was artwork and stuff like that. Yeah. So
More rats. No, it was
Is it more rats?
No, it was Chasing Amy's where the tracer. Chasing Amy's the one with the comic creators.
Yeah, right. Because I guess, like, because we'll get into like the differences in, I guess, the vibes of comic book shops. Like in my town, my comic book shop was at first a book exchange that was run by a really lovely Zimbabwean lady who decided to get rid of like all of the books, you know, or, you know, size them down and bring in back in the day anime and manga, what she could get, and opened up this room out the back with comics, and it was pretty cool, man. She was a really nice lady, and she listened and learnt and stuff like that. So at the start, when we were all young, like it was, oh, do you have this? Do you have that? No, but I will get it, and then before you knew it, it went from like a little box to suddenly like, you've got stacks like this big of comic, man, and you're only working like 10 hours a week at Woolworths. How the hell are you supposed to pay for this? But
yeah,
but like I'm sure like there's people around that still do those sorts of things. But yeah, that was my comic book shop, man, and I really enjoyed that. And when I've been to the big cities and things, I've, like obviously, like comic book shops from what I've seen, I've been into a few, you know what I mean? I'm not going to say I'm like haunting the places or anything, you know what I mean? Like, but I've walked in the door of a couple and, like I'm sure you have as well, mate. You know what I mean? Like over the years, what would you say that, like describe for me as a dude that's never been into Impact Comics. Like, what's Impact Comics? Like vibing like, man. Like what's the feel of the shop? Like are you like is it? You're out the back. Like doing the numbers and the accounting. Like sort of going like, man, thank God I did the numbers for that year back in university, and I wish I was still on the kegs. Or like, and the dudes are out there milling around talking, Captain America and stuff, or what's the vibe like, man? What's happening?
Well, the vibe. Well, the first thing about the vibe in Impact is the music. My business partner Cam, he's quite the musical connoisseur, and he has curated the musical selection for the store, and we regularly get I'm pretty sure we sell records for the record store a few doors down by playing music in the shop and people going and running off to buy it. So I've definitely seen people standing there holding up like trying to Shazam the song. So yeah, that's the first thing, right? And the next thing is we're in a lot of ways we're a specialized bookstore now, and I mean any comic shop dealing with new stuff is a specialized bookstore these days. There's so much of the product is in book form, and we've always focused on doing as much as we can with the kids sections, but we're actually looking at trying to expand that again right now. And see what the limit is, like where we can go with that as far as expanding the kids stuff. But it's really interesting. Like in September we tick over 20 years we've been doing this.
Yeah, right. So you've been there since day dot. You've been there since.
I've been at Impact since day dot. Like I opened it. The current store location we opened the start of 2008. So I don't even know what's that, 16 years? No. Anyway.
You're the accountant now.
Yeah. Numbers, man. But yeah, I'd just come back from a trip and visited US stores and got a bit of a vibe of what was going on with some US stores. And one of the things that I really did like was Midtown Comics had like board floors. I don't know whether they were authentic. They probably were. The upstairs, the Times Square Midtown is probably in an older building that actually has real board floors. But yeah, we just like the vibe of those, and so that kind of set a tone when we fitted out the store. We took over an old stationery shop, so we actually took a lot of their fittings. So we had glass shelves and stuff initially, and that was kind of cool. It lets lots of light through, and that's been a really big thing for us, is we want lots of light, and the light floating board floors and stuff bounce a lot of light around. When the Borders closed near us, we went and bought a whole bunch of Borders shelves, and so we've got those in now. They just sort of have a smaller footprint and taller and more capacity than the old glass shelves did. And again, that same sort of wood matched the floor and that. So the whole way we were being a specialty bookstore, we were literally stealing design stuff. Well, not stealing, we bought their shelves from Borders. And so, yeah, the shop's kind of weird that it's got these sections. You come in and there's the kids section. But then beyond that, if you go in the left lane, you're going to Japan.
Yep.
And if you go in the right lane, you go into sort of American pamphlet comics, monthlies, back issues, new releases. And then if you head down the middle, you get your graphic novels and sort of...
Yep.
And the way we break up the graphic novels, we're always chopping and changing what we're doing. We've got the classic sort of Marvel section and DC section. But then we've got some like writers section. So we've got an Alan Moore section. We've got a Brian K. Vaughan section. We've got a European section. We've got horror. We've got young adult section. We had a really big adaptation section, but the number of adaptations seems to have been shrinking recently. I think that market might have burned itself out a little bit or something, which is weird because there's so many books that are completely out of copyright right now that anyone could do a graphic novel adaptation of without paying a single licensing cent, and they could have a known brand. There's literally nothing stopping anyone doing an adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in graphic novel form. Whether or not there's an appetite for an infinite number of those. Shakespeare works really, really well in graphic novel form because, they're plays that were written pretty much just as scripts with minimal stage direction. So you can sort of just take it as a comic script almost and just work out where you want the panels to break up and turn it into a comic. So yeah, there's Shakespeare adaptations on and off over the years. So yeah, we've got those sections, and we're constantly making up with. We have a section we call Indie Legends, which is, your strict art, your cartoonists, your Will Eisners, Daniel Clowes, Jeffrey Browns, Knisley, Burns, all of those sort of things. Ultimately it's about making sure that once you find something, it's on a shelf next to other stuff you might like, whether or not you know of it.
Yep.
And yeah, we're constantly working out how to change that. The staff over the last month or so have started where we used to have end caps that were themed on whatever movie was out or whatever. The staff have claimed those, and now they're getting replaced with just non-stop staff recommendations, and they're just it's turned into a craft session at the front counter. There's just like all this cardboard and pens and stuff, and they're just all these staff recommendation signs going up on everything now. So which, that's a big part of what we do is recommendations, people coming in and asking and going. So I think we've got some of the best staff. At the moment we've got Grace and Katie, and they're just terrific at this, and what they're doing is they're just sort of taking what they'd normally be talking to people about anyway and putting it on these little handmade cards all over the shop, and so it's just sort of fast tracking some of those conversations, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's like you're sounding like it's a bit fluid like that with the staff, like what they've
Yeah.
read that day and like really enjoyed and stuff like that. It's like
Yeah, for sure.
like when you were like with your staff and things like that, do you tend to find that just like this could be a pickles moment, I don't know, but these are just one of those random questions that I like to that just pop into my noggin, every now and then. With like with your staff and things like that, do your staff generally come from like customers that have been shopping with you for a long time? If a job pops up and you might just go, a thing or two, you want a couple of quid while you're at uni or whatever, or are they, like, like, because what makes a comic book, like store person, Mel, like what's in their makeup, man?
I have no idea how to quantify it. We constantly have like a pile of job applications, right? And there's a mix. We've got a big uni population in Canberra. We're pretty close to the ANU being in the city.
Yeah.
So you get waves of uni students canvassing pretty much every business looking. So we get those. But we've also got, those kids we've watched grow up and they hit a point where they're like coming in and probing. And so most of our staff have come from regular customers, but it is literally them asking us, or them coming in and applying at exactly the right time when we've got a gap, or we do advertise, especially when we've got someone who's working close to full time or whatever leaving. We do tend to advertise because we want to make sure that we're actually finding the people who can commit to those sort of hours, as opposed to just someone who's looking for some casual work or that. And occasionally we've had some people that have come from completely different industries with very little comics knowledge, and sometimes they're the absolute best. Customer service is the key. It's easy to get excited about comics. Comics are easy to get excited about. It's not easy to be really good at customer service. So the customer service is kind of the thing that we need them to already have developed. We can pretty easily get people passionate about comics and up to speed on what they personally like, and every staff member tends to read different things, and they all complement each other. Like, that's part of the thing. It's nearly impossible to be across everything these days.
Oh yeah, man. There seems to be a wide variety of stuff. So like, talking about, because I've done some retail jobs over the years, and look, it's safe to say that I probably wasn't as patient when I was younger as what I am now that I'm a little bit older. And I tended to find that some people, from time to time, Mel, as you may be able to, agree or disagree with, can be a little bit what I would call annoying, and with their demands, etc., etc. In a comic book shop, that seems to me like a pretty chilled out place. Like, like the ones I've been into, like everyone seems fairly relaxed, and talking comics, networking, like chilling out, on selling, da da da. Like, have you ever, no names, you don't have to describe these people like in any particular fashion, you know what I mean? But have you ever had any just real, like, man, you're in the wrong shop type of people roll in? Yeah.
Well, I mean, part of the thing with our store, and part of the thing about where we set up and why we pay the rent we do, is we didn't want to be an exclusively destination sort of store. We didn't want to be that comic book that's out at the edge of the industrial area that you will go to because it's good, but you got to be going there. We wanted to be the comic shop that you found yourself in and didn't realize it was a comic shop. And
cool.
We wanted to mainstream comics, you know, like, and I mean, we're 20 years in now. It's a different conversation. When we say we want to mainstream comics, we were Munga was in the English language stuff, like Love Hina had barely come out when we started Impact Comics. So yeah, the idea of waves of teenagers looking for Japanese comics in bookstores and stuff that they can now just didn't exist 20 years ago when we sort of set out to do this. So we're right in the middle of the city. We're right in a pedestrian plaza area. We've got a gaming store a few doors down. We've got a record store, independent record store a few doors down. We've got, you know, all the Vietnamese place that everybody lines up for a banh mi on at lunchtime during the week is just a couple of doors down. And so we wanted to be right in the middle of that. And because of that, yeah, we get a lot of people who are in the wrong place. It's the trick is so often too, people come looking for the game shop and they wander into us and ask about a game and eventually they go, I'm in the wrong place. And I'm like, oh no, I always do it. And I'm sure somebody's heard it more than once from me and they think I'm a goose, but I always say, you're not in the wrong place. You're asking for the wrong things. They never ever leave without having a good sort of eyeball at the place, like they're sort of casing it to come back later after they've gotten this whatever game they've been sent out to get.
So that's that's like a mum or something whose child said, "Mum, you need to get me this game," and mum sort of, you know, doesn't really know the difference between comics and games and that, and they go, "Oh, that's a vibe and place." In you go, you got this, and it's like, see, I like the way you say that, you know, like how you said, you know, like what it was that you thought people would think you're a goose for saying, because like I think that's a very gentle way of just, you know, letting someone, I guess, down a little bit, because, you know, some people that don't know much about comic books and games might be a little bit, you know, uptight about coming into one of those places. But, you know, the way you're talking about with the wood, you know, like, you know, maybe, you know, we're not sure about the wood floors, but, you know, like maybe some floating floors, you know, that we could roll with, and the lights, and, you know, like, and it's nice and lit, because I like that, because a lot of the comic book shops I've been into, you're right, are like down 20-meter long dark alleys with graffiti on walls and stuff. You know what I mean? And you go in,
and I mean, that's super fun, right? I love those sort of places, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of space in the world for those. I'm 100% not advocating that we should get rid of those sort of places. I love those places, but that wasn't what we wanted to be. You know, like we wanted. Yeah.
But you're in a vibing joint too, from the sound of it. How's your damned Funko Pop section going? Still growing, grrr, from Mr. Challoner. How is your Funko Pop section going, actually, Mel? Because they're everywhere, those things.
Yeah, they're everywhere. So ours is shrinking now. Where once stuff's everywhere, we don't want it.
Yeah.
You know,
I've noticed that because what I was going to say is, like, when going back from, because Funko Pops, I don't know, man. Like, you know, like you were saying about the comic book shops, I think comic book shops are like beautiful in whatever fashion they're in, man, as long as they've got comic books, really. I mean, I love comic books. I was just simply suggesting that it, you know, like, as some comic book shops might love them, have, like, some people are a little bit, ooh, you know, like, to walk into them. You know, you've sort of seen with the light, you're in a vibe and place with the indie record shop, the vibe and bookshop, you know, like, all the and the game shop, I should say, all happening around you. So you're like you're becoming like I guess you're accessible to people that aren't necessarily, like they may want to come and, like get Watchmen, you know what I mean? Like, but they're coming to you because it's like, oh, because I mean, I guess it is to a certain extent, like appearances, you know what I mean, are everything as well, and accessibility for people and comfort and that, like you tend to find you go back to shops that you're comfortable in with people that know what they're talking about and things. With earlier you were saying that your YA books. So are you talking about just treat me like an idiot, okay? Like I just like to ask questions, and like some of the questions can make sense. Some questions will make sense at the end. It's just how my noggin works. When you were saying before about like YA books and things like that, are you talking about like the obviously the teenage books, like Hunger Games and that sort of stuff, or are you talking about comic book versions of those things that like you sell, or you're getting into the books as well, so you're definitely moving into like all cross genres of things, what I'm sort of getting at?
When you say books, you mean like books that don't have pictures in them?
Yeah, those
like
sort.
Defective Comics.
Yeah, them.
Not really a thing.
No, that's cool. I just wanted to. Look, man. That's good with me. You do what you do. You do what you want to do down there, man.
That's not true. We do.
For anyone that's not sure what's happening.
we do stock a few novels, and we do have a pretty sizable Japanese light novel section, because that stuff goes hand in hand with the manga and stuff. But no, when I say YA, I do not mean things like Hunger Game novels or anything like that. There is I mean stuff aimed at that late teen market. Right from tweens through to late teens. We get pretty broad in what we put in what we've labeled our young adult section. It's sort of it's literary sort of stories. It's the true graphic novel as opposed to comic book, for want of a better thing, aimed at the teen audience, and for your more true young adult stories tend to be coming of age stories. So quite often all of the LGBT stories tend to fall into that category. The variety of those now is getting so broad they're almost demanding their own section. Again, at the moment, they have a featured section at the shop in one of the end caps. It's sort of staff picks. So yeah, you get things, but yeah, it goes all the way through, like from things like Lumberjanes, which is adventure mostly, and it's serialized in that. But then you've got like DC having a go at doing graphic novels for teens, I think, and then they do mark some of them graphic novels for young adults, based on stories around existing DC properties. The ones that took off were the Cami Garcia ones based around the Teen Titans characters, the Raven Loves Beast Boy series. So there was a Raven, there was a Beast Boy, there's a Raven Loves Beast Boy, and then there's Robin, and yeah, they're doing all of these ones, and the following that artist had, name of the artist has just completely left my mind. But they were marketing it for the book market. So they made Cami Garcia, the writer, the big feature. It's very much a regular bookstore sort of thing. The artist is just the paid help. And I've gone and committed the ultimate sin by completely forgetting their name right now. But the artist, for us, the artist was who brought the customers in. The customers weren't coming in for Cami Garcia. But yeah, those books just sell and sell and sell and sell. And for a lot of people, that's the versions of the Teen Titans they know. Like you've got the Teen Titans Go cartoons, and you've got the Titans Netflix series or whatever it is, and you've got, and then obviously, yeah, Tom Taylor's writing the main Titans book, who functionally the Justice League now. But for a whole chunk of people who would traditionally just be manga readers, usually, that chunk of Titans is how they know these characters. And the other thing that is getting into that same section quite a lot is stuff that was originally published digitally on Webtoons. Yeah. I don't know whether you're familiar with Webtoons.
I found it. Look, I've known of Webtoons, but last week's guest filled me in on like some Webtoon, you know, like and what it's all about and everything, and was suggesting that there were like collected editions of like the Webtoon starting to roll out and things like that into shops and things. Yeah.
So stuff that's come from Webtoons almost always ends up in that same section. I mean, Webtoons is a format, like they can tell a wide range of stories, but it seems to be that market is who they've really nailed, and that's where the stories are really gripping, like really getting traction, is in that market, that teen young adult market. God,
you'd have like from where you are now, and let's go back 20 years, and you had a few jobs and things like that. So what was the overall? Obviously, you were reading comic books, and there's a couple of questions are going to come at you here, man. I'm going to machine gun you with a few, all right? So, you know, like see what pops into your head first. What was your first comic book that you got that you loved?
I honestly don't know. I definitely had a lot of the old black and white Australian reprints of DC books. I definitely had Superman's and Batman's. I distinctly recall, like a old Batman one featuring Catman that seemed to always exist in my life, and there's no one else in my house who would have owned it, so it definitely was mine, but I don't recall how young I was. But the story I usually tell about getting into comics and where I started collecting comics was, as a youngster, I had a sensitivity to, I developed a sensitivity to dairy, and so went on to a dairy-free diet. And country town, my godfather used to have this thing that he'd do every Sunday. And what he'd do is he'd go to the newsagent and he'd buy a stack of all the Sunday papers.
Yep.
And he'd do the rounds and go and visit everybody and bring them the Sunday paper and have a cup of tea with them. And that was his way of catching up with everyone. Yeah, and when he'd come to our house, he'd bring me a chocolate. Well, when I got the dairy sensitivity, he went, right, I can't bring you a chocolate anymore. So he started bringing me a Phantom comic. So he'd read the Phantom comic and then he'd give it to me.
That's a cool godfather. Yeah.
Oh, he was the best, man. And that was the first collection of comics. That was the first stuff where I really got into it and I understood the lore and the stories behind it, and I wrote away to join clubs and all that sort of stuff was the Phantom. So yeah, a very particularly Australian way of getting into comics, I think. Although not an Australian character, but through Phantoms, not a story that people outside Australia even understand. So
But you'd also know that like so many people that like I guess aren't as comics knowledgeable as others do think that, you know, like Phantom is an Australian created character, because I guess he's
Mhm.
just, he was in every newspaper. He was God. You could go to a petrol station, there was Phantom. You go to the corner store, there was Phantom. Everywhere you went, there was a Phantom. You know what I mean? Like when I was
Right,
growing up,
right.
like it was unbelievable, man. The dude was everywhere. Ghost Who Walks, all right, mate.
Yeah,
He was like turning up everywhere at your door,
yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
that's
like
what's great about now is there's so many Australian creators actually working on the Phantom. Like
yeah,
there wasn't back then. They were all just sort of imported stuff. So, well, there
yeah.
was not when I started. There was definitely a patch in the middle, but yeah.
Yeah. No, it is cool, man, to see dudes like Jason and stuff like that, and Glenn
Mm.
Lumsden and all them hooking into that sort of stuff. With so you got your Phantoms, and Godfather didn't get you chocolate because of your dairy intolerance. And look, who would have thought that a dairy intolerance would have led you down this path, man?
Oh, it's like my superhero origin, right? It's my weakness led to a yeah.
Well, that's right, man. Now, like before I get on to the next subject, still have a dairy intolerance?
No. No. I drink so much coffee that I mix it up with soys just so that I'm not drinking like a couple of liters of milk a day. So,
Yeah, right.
but no, not that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're doing well. So, if for anyone out there that's worried about Mel's well-being with dairy intolerance, we can
Plenty of
rest.
chocolate. I have plenty of chocolate.
Okay, we can definitely rest easy. Mel's back on the chockies, mate.
Yeah.
All right. So you got your Phantom comics, and you're out in small town Riverina way, that sort of thing, and you get into Canberra and you're at uni. So you're counting, you're not really, the numbers. Who would have known that dairy, like product issues and accounting, the two things that you didn't like, would have led off onto being so hand in hand further down the track. It's weird life, man. And like, so when what were you doing at uni? Like, was there a comic book shop at that stage in Canberra, or were you going to news agents to buy your Australian comic books and stuff like that? Were you solely Australian collecting, or were you dabbling in a little bit of, Batman, some Uncanny X-Men, picking up whatever you could find around the
Oh yeah,
place?
I was getting all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was Impact Records was this big record store that we stole the name from.
Mm.
I worked there eventually.
Yeah.
But it sold comic books. And Canberra ended up getting a couple of Phantom Zones at one stage. And D's Comics had always been in Canberra.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was hitting all of them. And I was and I lived on campus at uni, so I found other people who read comics, which is a bit of a difference to being in a country town. Once you stray outside the Phantom in a country town, there's not too many.
Yeah.
But
Did
yeah,
you,
it
did you
was.
have Friday nights, like, where it was that uni period, you sort of like come out of like Phantom, and then you meet another like-minded people who were like G'd up around comic books? That would have been like completely like mind-altering, I would assume. You would have discovered lots of things that you'd never ever heard of, because
Yeah,
this is pre-internet for people that are listening that are younger than us. Like, you could, because I'm from a smaller town too. Like, you're isolated. You're not only in the news agents and gas stations.
news
Who am I?
agents in the
Like petrol, places,
news
petrol,
agents in the country towns. Yeah, man, that was it.
like, and then
But
there was nothing
the
outside of that.
but then the OzCon conventions happened, and because I was finding, because things like issue 1 comics were making it into news agents in country towns.
And this is where your career in crime began. When the comic book conventions came around, you saw them for the first time.
Yeah. And so, and there's ads for conventions, and I'm like, all right, how do I do this? All right, how do I buy tickets? And, doing stuff like going into a Ticketek to buy tickets and trying to get them to find the tickets on the system. And yeah, I'm having weird flashbacks now to that. And
I have
loading myself up like.
Mel, don't worry.
But yeah, even from high school, loading myself up on the train to go to Sydney and go and hang out and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it was just, blew my mind walking into this room full of all these people doing all this stuff. Pretty wild.
Yeah. I can see you like you're G'd up thinking about it now. So, like, did you go with anyone else, or was this just like a solo mission? You had to like, no, I'm going, man. I'm going. Like I'm going by myself.
The first time I went, the first couple of times I went by myself.
Yeah.
One time in high school, I took one of the other guys from school, and little country town. Word got out these two boys were going off to a comic convention. Next thing you know, we've been invited down to the newsagent. We've got to sit here and do drawings for the newspaper. And
I thought you were going to say like the priests came down to like anoint you before you. went to
I'm sure there was some that were worried about that. Yeah, but yeah, no, there was a write up in the newspaper because we went to a comic convention. We weren't tabling or anything. We were punters. But we were two kids who were studying art who went to a comic convention, so everyone lost their minds. And
that's cool,
So that was probably the first time I was ever in the newspaper as the comic book guy, So
yeah. With well, there you go. So we've established that. We've established a track line here of how Mal Briggs has become Mal Briggs now, mate. You know what I mean? Like from dairy intolerant, phantom devouring, now on the soy milks and eating plenty of chocolate. So past that youthful, like health issue, onto, like getting into the small town news agents because you rocked up to a comic book convention, onto getting to university to, to have your mind blown because there's people that would have been, showing you stuff that you'd never, heard of, and you're networking and things like that. You're buying things from all over town. You're cutting sick. So your appetite, like you're eating, like you're into it.
Yeah.
So, let's get back to Impact Records, right? So Impact Records, and like if this is a pickles moment, just let me know.
I'll tell you when it is.
Yeah. All right. So without drawing certain obvious comparisons, Mel, there seems to be a similarity in name. So how did this all come about, mate?
Yeah, right. So so I was working at Impact, early 2000s. I was selling vacuum cleaners.
Yep.
And I had one of those, what'll you do if you didn't have to work for money? And I was like, I'd probably hang out in a comic shop all day. And I went, right, I need to work out how to hang out in a comic shop all day. And the biggest comic shop around was the comics counter in the back of Impact Records. And so I just cold sent them a letter and said, how about it? And I got lucky. They had a new manager in. They were looking at changing a few things. And, again, I had that customer service skills. Like I say, you can't. So I just got lucky. I ended up taking a pay cut to go there. But, yeah, and so I worked there for a couple of years. And that's where I met Cam, who is now my business partner. He was already working there. He was effectively my boss. He was my supervisor, manager, whatever, when I got hired there. And then in 2004, we got 7 days notice, I think, that the shop had been sold.
Yep.
And the new owners weren't going to be doing comics, and we were all going to be shifting over to working for the new guys.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to start telling the customers there's no more comics and liquidating the comics and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we were really lucky. We got approached by a guy who owned a nearby business who happened to own the building he was in. And he went, I've sort of got half a shop that I've got nothing in, and it looks like there's going to be a gap in the market. Can you guys set up a comic shop if I fund it? And so there was 6 weeks. We went from working at Impact Records and it was sold to opening Impact Comics like 6 weeks later.
Yeah.
And I look back on that now and I can't work out how we did it. I couldn't imagine doing it. There was a lot of late nights and just ordering pizza and we were, the things, internet speeds back then were super slow and I was doing it from home and we were just making it up as we went along and going and buying secondhand everything and yeah, and that first week we were terrified. We didn't know what was going to happen. We were up off street level and we'd already helped all of the customers go and find a new shop.
Oh.
So yeah, it was pretty crazy. But then when we put up the sign in the window, the newspaper wanted to do a story about us, and there I was again in the newspaper being the comic book guy. So it was, so we got really lucky. And I mean, yeah, we've got some customers. There's literally customers who came in on that first day who are still our customers now. That's one of our good friends had just had a baby, and so they brought her in, and so we've watched her. She's like our reality check on how old the shop is.
Right, gotcha. Seen her go through uni.
she's an adult now. It was like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, man, I am.
So strictly speaking, there is no link between Impact Records and Impact Comics. We literally had to start from scratch. We had nothing. But when we went to register the business name, we were like, nobody owns this. We used to be the guys. We're the faces that everybody knew. We're going to be really close to where we were. Let's just use it to make the transition simpler. I've spent the last 20 years going, no, different business. So there are definitely days where I wish that we hadn't used that name. But you know, it is 20 years, like I say, you know, the baby who came in on day one is now an adult. There's people who literally their whole lives have only ever known us and don't know that previous business. So yeah, we're sort of making our own thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. I like when you're talking about, like, if you look back on that 6 weeks and now you look back on it and you go like, man, I don't even know how we got through that. Would you suggest that there's sort of like some youthful just chance, you know what I mean? Like, we can do it, the energy, like, let's have a crack at it, you know what I mean? Who knows what we're doing? We'll just give it a go, you know, like. And
I honestly think I got dragged through it. I don't think I did a lot of the heavy lifting there. Like I have a habit of thinking about things for too long, and someone else has already picked something up and done it, and I'm thinking about 6 million other things on top of it. So yeah, definitely we got a lot of help, and yeah, everyone just went nuts, and yeah, and people just came out of the woodwork, and they're like, whatever, let's just make it happen, and it's been great ever since.
So from the first shop, Nick May, a trip to Canberra is not complete until the family visits Impact Comics. There you go, Mr.
That
May.
makes my day. That's exactly what we live for.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I love when kids get excited. Like, that's the goal, right? Like I say, the sort of shop we want to be is the sort of shop where the mums and the grandmas wander in and just sort of feel comfortable to wander in and ask a question. But also I want to be that sort of shop where the kids just look forward to it. It's a family outing. I want it to be a family place. Like I say, when we first opened, we were upstairs, right? So the exit of the shop, the entry and the exit of the shop, was a staircase that came up right in the middle of the shop.
Mm.
And it just made my day. It was tense as, but geez, it made my day. It was one of those days where the parents are like, we've got to go now. And this kid's like, nope, I'm not going. And they're like, we're leaving. And they start walking down the stairs. And this kid stood at the top of the stairs and he just stared at them. And they're like, we're leaving. And he's gone, then go. And I'm like, have I just adopted a 6-year-old? What's happening here? This kid was, he was willing to let his family leave. He was not going anywhere. And I was like, we've made exactly the shop that I want us to be.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I mean, you're a retailer, and I mean, you would have seen lots of different, I guess, dynamics of people come through. But how I got into comic books was my dad collected comic books when he was a little boy in Gundagai and stuff, and some of the best times that I had were like him being just as enthusiastic as me, going upstairs or going down into basements, or like into these, you know what I'm talking about, like those sort of comic book shops, like, and the cardboard boxes everywhere, and because now I guess, I mean, I'm probably going back here a long ways too, because some of the younger listeners and people that may watch this in the past, present, or future may see comic book shops as being different, but they they did have a very, look, man, when I was drinking, I liked dark, seedy bars. They had character. Do you know what I mean? Like, I liked, I just liked that atmosphere in comic book shops, or, they just, other than the comic books, they did have an atmosphere when you cruised in there. It was like, whoa, what is in that corner? What is in that box? That sort of thing. And I think that's, part of the mystery and things like that too, because do you tend to find that, because I mean, I don't, again, being from Townsville, our comic book shop up here, and no disrespect to our comic book shop, I love them because they sell comic books, but they are also, as was said earlier, stated, there's also, man, when I went in there, they were called the comic book shop or factory. That's what it is, and it was very comic book orientated. And then slowly over time, obviously, you've got to keep your businesses. You've got to find what works, as you've had, like in 20 years of experience. I'm sure you would have, as you've said, you brought Funko Pops in. You notice now they're shrinking. You're trying to get more of this in. Things adapt. Things are fluid. And we go. They've gone. And set up gaming tables in there now for Warhammer and stuff like that. So I know Warhammer dabbles obviously in books that aren't comic books, because they've got too many words in them and not enough pictures. Is how's have you delved into the Warhammer world yet, man? Over time, and is it big down there?
So we've definitely stocked some of the Black Library stuff, the Warhammer novels, and when there are comics, we always stock the comics. We've actually got one of our customers has written Warhammer novels, and so we've got to make sure that we support the customers as much as they support us.
Sure.
but we don't really have a lot of space for the gaming. When we in our old shop upstairs, we used to host Hero Clicks, tabletop gaming stuff. There's a little army of guys that do Hero Clicks. But when we moved into our current location, we just couldn't justify the space for it, and we're not gamers ourselves. It wouldn't be real authentic for us. But the other thing is that one of our neighbours is they've been there for longer than we have. They're now part of the Good Games franchise, but they've been there for forever, and they've got a whole upstairs gaming area and stuff. So we sort of complement each other without having to be in the same shop. But gaming in a comic shop with a gaming section is almost a standard sort of way for them to expand around the world. It's definitely a very normal companion sort of thing to have. We'd probably be more likely to put in a bar, but it just
get back to the old kegging days, mate. Back in the days back in the days, mate, at the Mansfield. This is taking me back now. My God, like when we were 18, me and my mates used to go to the nightclubs and everything. We go and crash at our mate's flat that was living in the city in not a pretty place, but it was just young fellas, and then there was this pub called the Mansfield, and it used to open real early, like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, to get the night shift workers coming through for a beer. And they used to put on Saturday mornings a $5 keg. So they'd snap open a keg and you drop down $5, and it's all you could drink, whoever was in the bar. And if you got there early enough, mate, there were like 5 blokes in that bar, and and you know how many pots of beer there are in a keg, man. Not often you'd see lunch, but anyway, so that was a pretty good follow-up from a Friday night. But kegs, good times. Now the reason I asked Warhammer is because, man, I just see a lot of Warhammer stuff like flowing through and things, but what do you with the advent, like being in the comic book shops and that, with the advent of media and movies? Peter Lane, good evening, buddy. How are you? Thanks for watching. With all the Marvel movies and the DC UE, or let's just go with DC. I can never keep track of these, extended university thing, whatever they're going on about. Have you found that those sort of comic sales are up, or what's the flavor of the month, man? Because I know this is a topic that comic book shop owners may be sensitive about, so I apologize if this takes you back to your dairy days, but you tend to go into what is now like bookshops, and they're selling an absolute ton of manga, you know what I mean, in various forms and all that. So are you seeing in the comic book specialty shop a consistent rise in that, or people still coming in and getting their Marvel because they've just seen Iron Man and things? What's the vibe like in it, man, in general?
So the link between Hollywood adaptations and Western comics is it doesn't help sales except when it does, I think.
So is that like when a new movie comes out, everyone will be like, "Oh, Iron Man," or something like that, and then after that,
if it's a character that the general population is likely to feel familiar with already, and the TV representation of them is what they would expect the comic to look like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't tend to move the needle at all. So, a good quality Spider-Man film
Yep.
results in almost no movement of the comics
Mm.
because people are like, yep, that's Spider-Man. And that's exactly what I thought he did. And if
Yep.
I'd wanted to read a comic, I would have done it by now.
Yep.
When they do something unusual, that's when people come in. And so Into the Spider-Verse definitely made more people ask questions. Probably not too many new readers,
Yep.
but definitely people who were familiar with comics who'd never read a Spider-Man before asked questions about Spider-Man for the first time. But kids, movies make kids excited. And you've got a whole generation of kids out there who didn't grow up with every newsagent having a rack of comic
Yeah.
books.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so this idea that these characters that they're familiar with come from comic books
Mm.
is an amazing novelty to a lot of kids. And when they discover these things, then they really want them. There isn't always kid appropriate stuff to sell them. That's part of the trick. And when there is, quite often it's in book format and it's not in traditional comic book format, and it doesn't quite have the same magic for them. But that said, comics to kids in little graphic novel book form is far and away the biggest selling format.
Yeah.
Manga comes second after
Yep.
that.
Yep.
But yeah, things like Dogman and that stuff sells. But going back to the movies, and this goes back a long way. Like The Crow. When people saw
Talk
The
to me
Crow,
about the Crow. I'll talk to you all night about the Crow, man. Like,
but people saw The Crow and it blew them away, and rightly so. And then they were like, "That's a comic. I didn't know comics could do that.
mm,
What sort of a comic is that?" And it's like, and then when they read the comic and realized that, oh, you thought that movie was dark. Oh my goodness, this
yeah.
comic is so much darker than that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
You're preaching to the converted here, man. I've been obsessed with the Crow since my grandma used to take me to a book exchange. And in the late 80s, man, maybe 1990, I can't remember. I was like, maybe just hey, Ben, how are you, buddy? Um, Randomly in Townsville, there were 2 issues of The Crow in the book exchange. And I was mad, uncanny X-Men and Wolverine and Daredevil dude then. And there was nothing new there for me to get. And I just saw these 2 Crow comics and just thought, oh, like, why not? Grandma's paying. And I'd never seen anything like it at the time, man. And
grandma probably had never seen anything like it.
yeah, well, which was pretty cool because if she would have opened up the comic books, I'm pretty sure, like she might not have been happy with it. But yeah, getting on to this book exchange, Mel, I've told this story before, but seeing you're a shopkeeper and you're into retail, the owner of the book exchange, his name was Jim. And Jim used to make a strange noise when you asked him a question that was a little bit like an African beast. And you'd go like, Jim, how much is this? Like sort of a thing, man. So
that was his processing sound. Yeah.
I'm not sure, but hopefully, those days of retail, being a retail assistant and making noises like that have disappeared, mate, because Jim used to scare a lot of people off, but he didn't scare me. Or my grandma from her Catherine Cookson books. The Crow was ripper, man. And did you, another movie, like, I know what you're getting at and I'll come back to you. I remember seeing at the cinemas The Road to Perdition.
Yeah.
With Tom Hanks and Jude Law and Daniel Craig in it.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that and really, really enjoying that movie. And you just start reading about it. And I found out at that stage that was a comic book too. And at that stage I was like, wow, man, like comic books are so cool how they cover so many genres, like. yeah, I digress. Back to the Crow. Back to the Crow.
But I mean, that's another perfect example where people go, "Whoa, how does Road to Perdition from a comic?" And not only that, when you find out Road to Perdition is a comic, but that comic is inspired by Lone Wolf and Cub, which is another comic, then that's where you get a new reader, right? That's the moment. That's the bit where you grab them, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like all of those sort of things that do something that people go, no, I know what comics are. It's Spider-Man cartoon. I've seen Spider-Man. I know what comics are. And you know, where people use the word comic book movie to be this catch-all phrase that is basically everything that is an Iron Man clone, where you know, person with some sort of power fights differently colored person with same power. At the end, everything's fine, and it's fine, whatever. And which is pretty much half of the MCU movies, and you're just like, but comics do so much more than that. That's not what a comic book movie is, you know. And yeah, Road to Perdition, A History of Violence, V for Vendetta, Watchmen, From Hell. Like every one of these, Sin City, the second they put Sin, based on the graphic novel Sin City, and because it was so visually striking that people, their brains process that's definitely from a comic, but also the sort of story it's telling is not what I expected from a comic. People went out of their way to find Sin City comics when that happened, you know, like, and Frank Miller's 300, you know, people went out of their way to find it. And now the animated, a lot of the DC animated movies are getting that sort of thing. Like they went through The Killing Joke, and I can't even remember which ones they were now recently. But those all seem to convert because, again, they were the more interesting stories. They were telling stuff that was outside of what you'd think like the cliches are. And they've got a new animated version of Watchmen coming up, and I think that'll probably see us have another bump in Watchmen readers. The really interesting one was Deadpool, and not the Deadpool movie.
Yeah.
Wolverine Origins, where Ryan Reynolds first played a completely different version of Deadpool.
Yes, yeah.
That movie caused an enormous explosion in Deadpool sales because it was like people saw the character and went, okay, so this character is clearly important. And I don't know, they must have got on Reddit forums or spoken to people who knew, and they were like, oh, the character looks nothing like that. And the comics are so much better than that. And all of these people just out of the woodwork just suddenly became Deadpool fans based on the Wolverine movie. Like the Deadpool movie really only got made because that Wolverine movie had sort of laid enough groundwork. You know, it had introduced Ryan Reynolds to the character. He got excited about it and he pushed for it, but also there was enough fans. That comic would have been cancelled if it wasn't for that. Like they were going through the whole Agent X story and stuff like that. Deadpool was not happening.
I remember picking up the New Mutants issue 98 from the newsagents years ago. How's Peter Lane? How are sales of Deadpool and Wolverine going leading up to the hype of the movie? There you go. There's one for you.
Not anything special, to be perfectly honest. I mean, there is a Wolverine Deadpool comic, but that's selling to the same people that would have been buying it regardless of if there's a movie. This is the thing. Once you're hitting like the third movie, people are feeling like they know the character. Like the character they're seeing in the movie is the character they're a fan of. It's not necessarily the comic character, and they don't feel like they need more background. They don't feel like they're missing anything. You know, when you're into like 3 movies worth of a character, they feel like they've been told all the story they need about that character. So yeah.
Well, man, when I picked up New Mutants issue 98 back in the day, I was still in like I was still in high school. Like, so we're talking like, man, what was it? Maybe 91, 92 sort of period, you know what I mean? And there's Deadpool, and I remember vividly reading that comic book, and I was far more interested at that stage in what Liefeld had done with the New Mutants, and Deadpool just seemed a bit of a filler sort of a character to a certain extent at that stage. And I never really, obviously I read comic books with him in it and knew who he was, but he never really like grasped me, I guess, as I don't know if I said grasped or grasped me there. So, you know, we'll leave that up to the viewers at home. You know, like, but he never really, I'm going to say got me. So there's no like, you know, confusion. Like as a super duper character. But when I missed the whole comic book Deadpool thing, but then I saw the movie, and from someone that wasn't fussed on him as a comic book character, when I saw that first movie, I actually remember watching it and went, I get that dude now. You know what I mean? That was just how in my mind, like, I went, yeah, okay, now I'm picking up what they're putting down.
Yeah.
You know, like how he.
Well, I mean, yeah, that very early Deadpool wasn't really fully formed Deadpool. You know, like yeah, over the years it definitely evolved and established where it was. You know, I was reading it just before it blew up. You know, where Gail Simone was writing it, and she was the comedy writer. You know, they brought her in because she's the comedy writer and let her loose on Deadpool. You know, and she was having a ball with that book, throwing Taskmaster in there and making fun of him and all sorts of stuff like that. So, yeah, you can see that. Yeah, if they'd forced Deadpool too early, yeah, and not let that sort of progression of creators come through and find the voice of the character, yeah, it would not have been the same fertile ground for Ryan Reynolds to really to play in and let his natural comedy work with it. Yeah.
Right man for the job too, man.
Yeah.
With like sort of just while we're vibing on this, you know, you get your big anime series and that come out. You know, like I don't watch much anime, but just thinking of one, for example, like if something like what's it bloody called, Attack on Titan, and it boom and it starts, you know, like dropping bombs and people are loving that.
Yeah.
Do you find that those comic books are like people are gravitating from the anime to see what the
manga? That's where the Japanese stuff is so different to the American stuff. Because where I say it's sort of hit and miss with the American stuff, and once I get into a certain point, it just doesn't really sort of convert anymore. The Japanese stuff, man, if the anime is hot, the books are just crazy hot, and they're telling exactly the same story. Nearly all the time, they're telling almost chapter for chapter the same story. They'll quite often the books will have just a bit more detail in them because the shows are taking up time with action scenes that are sort of burnt out in a single page or something in the manga. So you get a bit more room to tell a media story in the manga. But yeah, man, it converts. You can tell what has started screening by the sudden sellout of a title. And yeah, I don't even need to be sort of finger on the pulse of what is screening right now. You can see the book just suddenly move. And the perfect one to see this is One Piece. You know, One Piece is a worldwide phenomenon now. When it started, like when the English translations of it first started, we could not sell that. Nobody wanted to touch it. The art was too cartoony and weird. It wasn't very manga inspired, all this sort of stuff. And then when the anime hit in English, all of a sudden everyone got it. And all I can put it down to is it's one of those things that the animated stuff, you can consume it passively. You don't have to be invested to read the story. And so you can get the vibe of what it's like, and then go, yeah, this is a story I'm interested in, and go and find the books then. And so, yeah, we've definitely seen waves of all the biggest stuff going through at the moment. Attack on Titan was monstrous. One Piece is big now. Naruto, Dragon Ball, My Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, and then a whole bunch of the other smaller ones, things like Blue Lock, and there's a whole heap of stuff coming through. But the big thing that just cannot stop selling in the Japanese stuff is Junji Ito's horror books, and each one of those is kind of a standalone story, so you don't end up getting this 105, 110 volume run like you do with One Piece, but yeah, man, they just sell and sell and sell. Like, everybody wants their creepy Junji Ito books.
Yeah. I've got a bit of a soft spot for Berserk and
great
Blade of the Immortal. I love that comic book, Blade of the Immortal, man. I sort of led on to that from Lone Wolf and Cub. Like read Lone Wolf when I was younger. I was like, what other ninja?
What else? I need my feudal period Japan. Give me a sword. Yep.
Dude, I'm a sucker for that stuff, man. Let me tell you, it's like, I reckon if you wanted to put me in a happy mood, mate, you know what I mean? Like, you just, I don't know, like maybe buy me something nice, like some feudal Japan, like black and white comic books, and like I'd be all right.
That was literally, I had a friend bring me back a Japanese copy of Lone Wolf and Cub from Japan, from like some secondhand bookstore somewhere, and I was just like, this is my favorite thing.
Oh man, beautiful, mate. Man, unbelievable. The joy I've had, like, reading those comic books, man, and how I discovered Lone Wolf and Cub is when I was very, like, young, and the TV SBS was just starting, so we're talking very young, and at like midnight, 1 a.m. in the morning, they drop out those Lone Wolf and Cub movies.
Baby Courage on the River Styx.
Yeah, man. And it was just like, what is this? You know what I mean? Like, and I'd just sit there, and
he pulls the swords out of the handles of the Baby Courage, and you're like, what is going on?
Baby, like, bang, like, and then swords. I know, dude. Like, it just blew my mind, man. And then, so, like, in that regard, you might be right with how this. Do you think their stuff translates? Because you mentioned, like, there's not much differentiation between the anime and the manga in terms of just a touch of storytelling. The foundational story is pretty much there. Where, if you go to, let's just take X-Men, right? Whatever you want. You've got the Uncanny X-Men and stuff, so you've got that. And then you've got the X-Men movies, which obviously, to fit in, like 500,000 issues, they've got to create their own story into 3 or 4 movies, you know what I mean? Which give it a different feel, like, so people can follow one or the other. But then you get the cartoons as well. So, you've got X-Men 97, like back in the day, was totally different to what they were putting out. And do you think that the such sudden, sharp changes in, like, story shape and mold is something that may not appeal to people? Do you know what I mean? Like, does the anime and the manga together being similar attract more people because they know what they're getting, as opposed to, what's Wolverine going to be like in this? He's not the same as that. Or what's Gambit like in that? I preferred this version of Gambit as opposed to that. But, like, it seemed, I even got confused when I was in my, like, prime heyday. You reckon that's something that would be?
Completely. Like, they don't produce them with an idea of crossing over. Like, the companies that make films want you to watch the films. They're not interested in you going back and reading the comic. And as far as they're concerned, they've bought the rights to the story in the comic, and that's all the payment that needs. And that's one of the biggest problems with the movie studios owning the publishers, is that the license rights aren't flowing back to the creators. When Robert Kirkman sells the rights to The Walking Dead for a live action series or Invincible for an animated series, whether they're authentic to the book, which on both of those they've up and down, they've been pretty authentic to the book. He's been an executive producer and co-writer on both of them and that. But even if they're not authentic to the book, he gets a solid paycheck out of that. Whereas Marvel Comics, the comics publisher, doesn't see a bump on their balance sheet when Marvel Studios makes a new Iron Man movie or something. You know, when Marvel Studios makes this upcoming Fantastic Four movie, there's not going to be some royalty payout that flows to the publishing arm.
Yep.
And that they can then reinvest in paying talent to make something else exciting and new. The publishing arm is expected to be self-sufficient. And that's one of the biggest problems there, is that the studio are taking all the studio money that they're building using ideas that come out of the comics guys and not letting the cash flow go back for the comics guys to invest in creators and royalties for creators and whatever else. And so we're seeing weird publishing decisions happen all over the place. And it is one of the better things about indie productions that the indie comic creator, when they sign the rights away, the money does actually flow back into comics publishing. Not every indie publisher is like a Kirkman, who just is constantly just reinvesting in making another comic and another comic. Some of them literally just make comics in the hope to sell a movie or a TV thing because they really just want to be doing that. And I've completely forgotten why I started talking about this. I've just rambled on. So
this is the fluidity of Chinwag, Mel. Like, this is the beauty. Woohoo! We're off and running now. Like, we're fluid, man. Like with that, we were talking about the congruency of like the storyline with the anime and manga as opposed to the Marvel stuff, and then the independent, like, veering off. Let's go into the independent side of things. We've talked about the big two and know how they work and things like that. But like you got Image, an independent. Like when I was really like vibing into comic books, because I've sort of, like, these days I'm eclectic what I read. Hey, like, oh God, I'll read. I don't even know what I'm reading sometimes, man. Like I don't read anything in order. It's like I'll just be like, oh, I want to read Swamp Thing, and I'll go and get Swamp Thing. Or then the next I'll be like, I haven't read Berserk in a while. I'm going to go and read Berserk, and then I'm off and I'm reading. Like what have I been reading? Let me think. I'll give you an example. So there was there is Swamp Thing. There's some Australian comic book stuff. Gods Amongst Men and Foes I've read recently. What else is in there? There's a whole heap of Scar stuff I've been reading. Those Australian legends, Steve Carter and Antoinette Ryder. I've got a stack of them, man. I'm churning through at the moment. It's like, but anyway, I'm all over the shop with like what I read is what I'm getting at. So with your independence, so for me, Dark Horse was cool, even though they're not independent, but like they were cool in their day because it's like they had all the Star Wars and Predators and Aliens and that, and they gave a whole new world of existence to, movie type things. But like independent comics, what's your top, man? Like what's vibing in that zone of the, the left or right or center stage, mate?
Yeah, this is an interesting thing too in itself. Like independent becomes a really weird label because Dark Horse did its licensed stuff, but also Dark Horse is the home of Sin City and Hellboy, and those things are straight up creator owned. It's effectively an independent publisher.
Let's not forget Barbed Wire.
Well, Well, see, barbed wire was sort of rolled into that whole effort that they had to try and create a superhero universe that, they had X and barbed wire and I can't even remember all of them. They all
I
had a
like
logo.
X. I
They all
thought
had a
X
logo.
was right, man. He was a
Yeah,
cool
yeah,
looking.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So every now and then, yeah, you get a company like that comes up with wants to make a superhero universe. Invincible and Image was part of their sort of, yeah, we're going to have this cohesive superhero universe, and it's sort of every now and then Image seems to come out with another wave of, oh, we're going to do a superhero universe, and it's like, no, just don't, just just tell stories, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, yeah, we don't need another superhero universe. We just need good stories.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, right now, Daniel Warren Johnson's doing Transformers,
Mm.
but man, his things like Murder Falcon and Do a Powerbomb. Oh man, when I read the first preview of Do a Powerbomb, I was just like, this is the best thing ever. This is so good. Nobody draws action like that guy.
Yeah.
Um, oh man, there's a whole bunch of the thing that is blowing my mind right now is Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. I don't know whether you've seen this thing.
No, I have not.
Okay. So what was the name of that Dexter? The serial killer hiding out as the cop.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
the made
That.
TV show. It's based on novels and that, right?
Yeah.
So imagine Dexter, but instead of working for the cops, he's a woman who owns a hardware store, but he's actually a serial killer. And instead of it being a woman, it's like a Richard Scarry style teddy bear person who lives in a little village of all these anthropomorphic animals who live their quaint little lives. And yeah, this teddy bear who runs the hardware store takes her truck and drives into the city to pick someone off to go and murder them in the forest, because that's how she gets her kicks. And somebody dies in the town, and so she's scared that the cops are going to investigate that murder and find her. And it's this amazing murder mystery where your protagonist is actually a murderer themselves, and everyone is a cute little animal, and it's all watercolors, and it's bonkers. It's just so good. That's probably the one that's blowing my mind right now.
So that's going to be a question later on. Is what's got you now? And
Yeah, that book, just about everybody that I went, try this, they just came back and went, what the hell was that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, man, it's cool to see um such an array of different like stories and people trying different things too, man. A lot more of late, because I think for me, one of the factors that I, to an extent, got a little bit fed up with the big two. I apologize for anyone out there that loves them. They're comics. We all love them. But if everyone in the world had the same taste, it'd be a little bit boring. So anyway, back to what I'm yakking about is I got a little bit, when you've read like 250 issues of the Uncanny X-Men, you're starting to see, like the same story, like a few times in that run. So you sort of tend to get a little bit like, well, I've been here, done that, and while I do enjoy very long series and the monthly, like issue 500s and 600s and all that, I really enjoy I guess as they still call limited series, where you get like 4 or 5 issues that are just like wicked, like they've trimmed the fat, man. You know what I mean? Like they've just tried something really different, and whether it hits and misses with some people, it's like it's all about the creative process and having a crack at it. Hey, they're the sorts of things that excite me, as opposed to you know, like, I don't know. Do you still get people that come in for, their 467th issue of the Uncanny X-Men in a
Oh
row,
yeah.
man, religiously?
Well,
They're in there at
it,
8:30 a.m. Thursday morning, and if it's not out of the box, Mal, where is it, man?
yeah. Well, it's Fridays here, man, because we're inland, you know. But
It doesn't take that long for the. Oh, maybe it does.
you
Like,
got to add an extra day. It's yeah.
yeah. Wow.
The Well, X-Men are just about to relaunch.
Oh, yeah.
X-Men's a great example of like you say, they start telling the same stories. That's part of what I really dug about the recent Krakoan era stuff. It alienated so many people because it took a big leap and said here is a story that respects everything that's come before, everything that you feel excited about. I'm going to fold it into what we're doing, but we're going to evolve and we're going to change what this book is about.
Yeah.
And they gave it a red hot go, and there was some really cool stuff in there and some really wild sci-fi concepts in there. But I think that's kind of what it became, was this big political sci-fi book, and it wasn't this rebellious, heroic minority adventure book. And so my understanding is that's where we're going with the relaunches, is we're going back to brass tacks. And I mean, X-Men goes through little waves of resets like that. Things like the House of M, Age of Apocalypse. You get these little resets. They almost have their own Marvel version of a DC style crisis event in the X-Men, where they kind of reset things and rejig things back to where they belong. And so every now and then it's a good time for some new wave to jump on. And you know what? If they're doing that every now and then and people take it as an opportunity to jump off, as long as there's new people jumping on, I don't think there's any problem with them going back then and retreading the same ground with new writers and new artists are always going to approach it from a different way. And there's going to be new trends in the way the storytelling works, and it'll appeal to a new generation. I mean, yeah, if the X-Men aren't appealing to teenage audiences who feel like they're on the fringes of society, it's probably not targeting itself very well. Like that's where it sort of belongs. That's where the whole metaphor of it belongs. You know, each character kind of has their sort of part of society that they represent, and that was what they yeah, and X-Men's very, very particular in what it does. I mean, yeah, the idea of them becoming a political world power was a natural progression of everything, but it's probably not the story people want to read in another 10 years' time. You know,
I would agree with you in terms of for me, as someone that's grown up with comic books, yeah, like take X-Men, because I was obsessed with X-Men. I've got like 400-500 comics over there of X-Men. You know, like I was well into them, and like as long as people, again, we come back to like not everyone's going to like the same thing or the same creator or the same artist and all that, and it's like as long as you said, if some people drop off, some people might be attracted to, like what that new version of them is, and like carry on the wave and the wing and that, and those people might be like my dad, who like enjoyed one part of Spider-Man, and his enthusiasm for that brought me into comic books through that, and like it's a cycle that just rolls on with families and kids and stuff like that, man, which keeps it all alive and things. And I just stories are good, man. In general, as long as there's a quality to them, it doesn't matter whether I like certain things or don't. You know what I mean? As long as it's the variety is the main spice of life. Like I think, and it's all good for the genre in itself. The market. Now, man, I'm going to get to. We talked earlier about when you were a young man and you went to Comic Con conventions and your mind was blown, like because issue one, you'd come across, and you and I must be similar ages because I remember when issue one came out and Zero Assassin and all that. I was buying them off the shelves too and was like, whoa, you know what I mean? This is some good stuff, And I'm a bit of a sucker for the old dystopian science fiction cyberpunk setting myself, Mel. So, just saying. Now, man, when it comes to like you're obviously people know people in the Australian comic community, and you no doubt keeping an eye on creators and stuff around Australia. How are you? How do you feel about Australian comic books as such? Like, do you find them healthier than what they've been? Have they always been healthy after 20 years in the comic industry or, comic shop and previous being a fan? Where do you see Australian comic books as a whole, mate, over your time dabbling since issue one?
Wow. I don't know. I think what I really like about comics in Australia right now is the variety that's being produced. And I mean, the variety of storytelling, but the variety of formats, the variety of markets they're reaching out to. Yeah, you've got your comedies and your adventures and your single issue comic books and the traditional formats and stuff. And then you've got amazing graphic novels that are getting published by big mainstream publishers, the non-fiction stuff and just the variety's crazy. It's really hard to get a bead on what's going on, like I'm in the shop the whole time and very much part of the shop's role in the market and the industry is facilitating stuff that's mainstream releases. There's so many conventions in the country now that just about any indie book is available at a artist alley somewhere. And anything that isn't being published by a mainstream publisher is almost always getting funded through something like a Kickstarter and that. So you're getting this market that is being served directly by things like the Kickstarters. And it's a whole ecosystem that's happening without me being savvy to like numbers or rhythm or what's going on. It's not the same as like the week in, week out rhythm that I see with American release stuff. And so, yeah, just trying to get a bead on the scale of it. And when I was in the early 90s, when I feel like I basically wouldn't touch an American book. I was just reading. I was full blown hipster on this. It was like, yeah, I read comics, but you've never heard of them. Like it was like if you read the same comics as me, I would know. I would have seen you there buying them. Like so. Yeah, and so I put a lot of effort into being as informed as I possibly could be with no internet and no, you're just doing whatever the heck you could back then. Whereas now, my job kind of stops me from having the time to chase all of these different corners of the market, which I suppose ultimately, I guess I'm trying to get around to saying it looks pretty exciting and big and healthy and stuff simply because it's hard to keep a track of. That if with all of the opportunities and avenues and everything, if it was easy to keep a track on, it would be disappointing. That said, it'd be lovely if we could have one single catalog that we can go, here's everything that's around or something. But there's definitely efforts to do that between things like Comex and Owner Indie and things like that, and again, lots of opportunities to get the creators directly to the consumers, which is terrific. And then there's a whole wave of people too that are getting published out of the US. Tom Taylor and Nicholas Scott and Andrew Constant and John Somariva and I don't know who is Glenn Lumsden doing something in the US at the moment. I don't know. There's all these people working away quietly in their own rooms. Nobody knows what they're doing. And then you've got things like IPI comics coming out, and it's showing up in the American catalogs, and we're importing those with Australian written across the sort of going all the way around again. There's no way I can say that it doesn't feel good. The stuff that's available now, and it's just diverse. It's just everywhere. Anyone who wants to make stuff can. There's nothing stopping them, I think. So, why not?
Yeah, it's good that it's interesting you said that, because even from someone from my perspective that partakes in the comic books and does Chinwag and has met people and reaches out to people and stuff and has met other people through live streams and things in the community. There's still so many people that I've never heard of, and there's still so many comic books that I see and I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? It's up to issue 6, you know what I mean? I didn't know that, you know what I mean? And it is, man. It's really, it's pretty humming for me, I guess. But a lot of factors, like you just said, printing's a lot cheaper now. There's print runs aren't, from just talking to people through Chinwags and over my time here, back in the day of issue 1s, there were giant print runs, you know what I mean, that you needed 3s and 5,000s and stuff, where now you could print 20, you know what I mean, if you really wanted to, you know what I mean, and put the effort in, and there's webtoons and all those sorts of things. So there's a lot more content obviously getting out there. I guess it's not will I use it as a house deposit or buy a car? You know what I mean? Or will I try and print a comic book and get it into, news agents Australia-wide through Gotch? What is it, Gordon and Gotch or whatever?
Gordon and Gotch, Heaven knows if they've kept numbers of how many comics Gordon and Gotch shredded because they got returned from news agents. So.
Oh, man. Yeah, I heard a really sad story. I went to get an issue of the Phantom about 12 months ago, and I was a little bit late on it. I'd just been caught up and just hadn't thought about it. I was going past the news agents, and I was like, oh, maybe they've got it. And I went in and I spoke to the lady that was working there, and I said, oh, have you got this issue of the Phantom? And she said, oh, you just missed out. And I was like, oh, bummer, you don't have it out the back or anything? She's like, no, they're in the bin if you want to go out there and look. And I'm like, oh, okay. Let's, don't send it back. And I was a little bit like, but anyway, I thought that sucked. But that just from me being a creator and like thinking that these people are putting their blood, sweat, and tears into something and sitting in these little rooms under lights, man. You know what I mean? Like to find out that, you know, like their works, you know, certain numbers of copies are, you know, like in the industrial bin out the back, you know, like to me was a bit like, okay, but that's not cool, but that's the way it works, I guess. Yeah, like with now that you're in the hip and jiving section of the Canberra city, do you have many like independent Canberra comic book creators and stuff coming to you, Mel? You know, like trying to ply their wares onto you. Like, Mel, will you, you know, like buy a couple of these comic books, mate? You know what I mean? Like, and see if they can sell. How do you operate like that, man? You know, like.
Not a lot. I think we've probably this is the reality of the flip side of how easy it is for the creators to sell direct to the consumers, whether that's artist sallies or Kickstarters or whatever else, is that the economics of how they price the books and that means that there's not a lot of meat necessarily left to pay a retailer's cut. And as much as I want to be the guy who supports these things, I got to pay my rent, and
there's a percentage that you have to make as well. So I guess from the person coming to you, I mean, it's almost, I guess it's a prestige, I suppose, for them to have a couple of issues of their comic book in your shop so that you can continue to be a comic book shop, because we do know that comic book shops are, you know, getting rarer around the parts, you know, like the nation in America and stuff.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
You know, from a businessman, you know what I mean? You got to think about that as well. You know, so it is one of those things. But you haven't found that, like, for you personally, you seem like a pretty cool dude, but like I know a couple of, like, I've got a couple of, like, you know, I don't have many friends, Mel, but you know, the couple I've got are, like, I'm going to talk about it, my American friends, who are, they're really not my friends, they're just people I talk to on the internet. So, you know, like, if that's what friends are these days, hey, I don't know, you know, what's your definition? Who knows? But anyway, there's people that I know of by name and stuff, and see where the fluidity of this goes. But anyway, I'll just get to the question. Some of them are kickstarting, you know, they're publishers that, you know, like, and it's all good, man, I'm just saying what it is, and they publish their comic books in large numbers through Kickstarter and stuff. And some of the comic book shops in America don't stock their comic books because like, they see Kickstarter as, I guess, a distributor, which it is to a certain extent, you know what I mean? Like, your customers coming to you, you're shipping it out, etc. So they feel that it's not beneficial to those guys as a comic shop to sell Kickstarted comic books. Now, this isn't saying whether you do or not, but as a comic book shop owner, what are your thoughts on that? Do you see Kickstarter as a competitor? Because, you know, like, to a certain extent, you know, because people are going to Kickstarter to buy comic books, or do you not phase yourself by it because they're not things that you're aware of? Or, you know, what's your thoughts about that whole, like, looking at things?
Well, it's definitely eating up part of the market. Like, and again, this is the thing. If that's the ecosystem, like, if that's the market that a book needs to sell in to sell, that's cool. That's fine. But it doesn't. It isn't always additive. Like I know that I've stocked things. Sometimes I've stocked things that I knew were kickstarted. Sometimes I've stocked things that I didn't know were kickstarted.
Yeah.
And I have, on on examples of both of those, had people who I was sure were going to be interested in this book, who came in and went, "Hey, this thing just got released. Have you seen this?" And they were like, "Oh, cool. I backed this. That must mean that my copy's on the way sometime soon." And you know, like, I ordered this because I thought I knew my customers. And I did. I nailed it. I nailed it so well that customer was so invested in that market that they backed it directly with the publishers. If the market was so big that I knew for every one of those that I knew, there was 2 or 3 other ones that would like the same stuff, then that wouldn't faze me at all. But the market's not that big, and the diversity of product, especially things that go to Kickstarter, tends to be ultra niche stuff that tends to have a less than broad spectrum appeal. So when I lose that customer I can identify from my books, then I lose any opportunity to multiply that. Like, to give you an idea, if I order in 4, with most publishers, if I order in 4 copies of a book with overheads and margins and stuff, if I don't sell all 4 copies, if I'm left with 1 copy on the shelf, I have lost money stocking that book. Right? So if I know that I've got 5 customers that I know will pick something up, I've got margin now that I can afford to risk 1 more copy on the shelf. And that's where it becomes a multiplier, that I've got customers who will discover things, and I'm, as a business, I'm prepared to take risks on things like that. But if it's a product that I think I've got 4, maybe 5 customers, but 2 of them might be already buying a copy from Kickstarter, now I'm like, I don't want to risk stocking this unless someone comes in and specifically asks me for it. Because if I put this on the shelf, I even if I'm left with 1 left, I literally made nothing on that product. It didn't pay rent for the shelf that it was on. It cost me money. And it's just one of those hard realities that, you know, if there's a book that we can just sell by the box load, and there are indie creators, there are indie self-published things that I literally keep going back to the well and go, and send me another 20, send me another 20, because I know that I've moved enough that even if I order in another 20 and I never move one again, I've still not lost any money. And so that's that multiplier, because if I lose 4 readers to a Kickstarter that, you know, would have bought it off the shelf, then I'm not going to find that 5th one. Whereas if all 4 of them come in and buy it from me, then I've got enough margin to risk stocking another copy to find that 5th person. So it's a balance, man. It's wild, and we're doing it literally every single week through the mainstream things across single issues and books. There's well over 100 different products. You know, it could be some weeks 200 different products, and then those comics will then have 4 variants each, and just like it's just hundreds of things, and that's just the mainstream stuff that we're literally making these calculations on. There's Marvel books that we rack 1 copy because it's just like if I rack a second one, it's I'm risking my money. So for it to be an indie thing where a percentage of the potential market for that is kickstarting it, the numbers have got to be real good.
That's a super interesting perspective that you know, like that you gave then, because like from me, like I can see from like your perspective as a business owner. I mean, essentially, you wouldn't really want to even be having back issues, would you? You know what I mean? Like
Well,
to a
I mean,
certain
this is the thing. If
not
it's a
the
product,
classic back issues, but you wouldn't want those extra, you know, one over like on the shelf for a long period of time, because it's like it's taking up shelf space to get
yep.
new stock in. Then you got to break down, because like the first issue might sell, but then you're taking a chance on the second only. What, you know, they've got those, you know, things I've read, like the second issue will only ever sell 75% of what the first
Oh,
issue did. Or what, you know, that sort of
plenty of
thing.
titles, it's 50%.
Oh, there you go. Like,
Yep.
man, you must know what. Do you ever get out of that office in there, Mel? Or like, you know, like these are the things that go into it, mate. You know, that no
Yep.
one ever like thinks about. You know, because yeah, that I from asking you now as a business owner and seeing your perspective on the Kickstarter side of things, you know, there is a um, definitely cleared that up as to why that would be, you know, the way that you would think, you know, and you do have to make margins, like you said, to keep your lights on and, you know, like pay your staff and everything, because as we said, you know, like comic book shops are certainly, you know, like getting less and less, mate. You know, you read about it a lot over the last couple of years, which is no good. So the ones that are still there, you know, you got to try and strengthen and numbers and stuff. Um, I I like the fact that you've stayed in that area, man, for so long, you know, and you're in a hip, driving place, you know.
Mm.
I like the fact that you know, for a lot of the reasons that you like. Oh, there you go, Nick May. I completed my run of Oi 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 issues at Impact. There you go. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like,
That's a good anthology. Yeah. I
yeah,
like
yeah.
that book. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a few issues of Oi 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 myself, mate. You know, that's back in the day was where I first discovered Dylan Naylor and a few other
Oh,
people
wow.
like
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in
I've
those
got, I've
issues.
got, yeah, I've got some Fireballs posters by Dylan. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
old nightclub I used to work at when they were closing down. They had all of their posters from gigs that they'd had that were mounted on the wall, and I was like, I just want the Fireballs ones. I have to have the Dylan Naylor Fireballs ones. So,
Yeah, that you still got that floating around?
yeah, 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 yep.
That's cool. You must have got on another note. You must have got some cool merch over the years, man. You know, like I'm because I'm assuming back, like the other thing I was getting to earlier about comic book shops when we were growing up is there wasn't Funko Pops and there wasn't this and that. There were like fold out, you know, like posters, and you know, like there were cardboard standees. You know what I mean? Like, and rare T-shirts, man. Like there wasn't heaps and
Yeah,
heaps of T-shirts getting around like there is now. You know, if someone
we
had,
had. When I say, okay, here's a weird story. Um, I say that when we left Impact Records, we didn't take anything and we started from scratch. Some things came with us. We had a War Machine standee that was from, what was the name of the title? Drawing a complete blank on what the actual series was. Anyway, this is a War Machine standee, and it had a motion sensor with LED lights and like a gun sound. Like when you walk too close to this thing, all these guns, little red LEDs would blink in and go do 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 do. We had that in the shop from like almost day one, and it was like we had no War Machine comic. Like there was no, well, nobody knew who War Machine was. We hadn't had Iron Man 2 yet. Like it was just when Iron Man 2 hit though, we were like, all right, now we're doing some promo with this thing.
yeah, yeah.
I think some dude won it in a raffle eventually. We were like, yeah, it's done its time. That thing's got to be vintage by now. Like
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
no idea where that's ended up now. But yeah. So yeah, no, definitely seen some cool merch. Yep.
Yeah, that probably would have been back from the what was that series called, man? The Iron Wars or something like that.
No, it wasn't Iron Wars. It was something Works. Works
Probably
with an
Iron.
X. Yeah, something like.
Like, yeah, probably something, very much like that. Like, oh, we'll go to planet with some aliens. What's the name of the series? Fighting aliens in space. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Like that. Both got super original names.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Well, Mel, as we start winding down our chinwag, mate,
Mm.
there's I'm gonna do my best to get like to condense everything, like, because I like to do this just to let you know I've been listening and enjoying our conversation and stuff, and so we got let me I gotta now that I've given myself this big rap, like I've got to get on the game, man. I don't want to be an egghead, like, even though I am, but it's so we've got dairy issues. We've got Godfather was a super cool dude, didn't bring you chocolates, and he started bringing you Phantom comics. So you started getting a taste for Phantom, not chocolate. Okay, so we've got that. Then you started going into your news agents and things like that, starting to get a few more Phantoms and things. Then as you started going into the big, you finished in Cootamundra there, because we've discovered that the Cootamundra wattle is not your friend, but you mentioned a couple of other tree varieties that are, which forgive me, but I can't remember their and so then we've moved into Canberra to go to university, and you discovered that accounting wasn't your thing because people weren't doodling enough. So then you went into the graphic designs and the industrial designs because people were doodling more, and you're still kicking yourself to this day that you didn't finish that. But it finds out that your dairy issues led you to Phantom, which led you, strangely enough, to accounting, which further on down the track, after you went to some Australian comic book conventions, after coming across issue 1 and Agent Zero, it led you to what could have possibly diverted you from comics into a life of crime, about stalking gently, as you said, some of the local comic book creators, which made you think to yourself, this is really cool. What would I like to do with the rest of my life? I would like to hang out in a comic book shop. So you went to Impact Records, who had a comic book shop out the back of that, and you met your mate Cam, who you're still buddies with and running the shop right now, and you two work together. Then with 7 days notice, you find out, you boys, someone's bought your Gonski, like, we're out of here. Couple of days later, like, while you're trying to sort things out, dude comes down, says, I got half a shop. You want to have a crack at things and see how you're going. You go to register a business name, and you're like, Impact Records. I'm going with Impact Comics because everyone knows that, which you've come to regret from time to time in your period there. And then, man, you have gone from an upstairs place with staircases in the middle, with one of the happiest moments being a 6-year-old kid nearly being adopted into Mel's family because he was going to let his parents walk out into the street without him because Impact Comics was so cool. And then to where you are now, in a super hip place with a gaming shop, the Warhammer sort of crew down here, a bookshop, you humming in there with Cam and your crew there at Impact Comic Books. With people growing up, you're seeing babies go to adults. You help creating the new generation of comic book readers in Australia and supporting people. And you've been at it for 20 years, successfully so. You've touched on a few ways you think about what you're looking for and how your business has developed. And you've turned out to be a bloody decent dude, man. And I have enjoyed this conversation immensely. So, was that a reasonable roundup?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
You make me sound interesting.
Yeah, well, you are. I think you're very interesting, mate. So, like, yeah, no, it's cool. Now, as we wind down our show, the one thing that I do like to, ask everyone, and it's just one of those things. Sometimes like it can be two things, and you know what? Because you're a shop owner, we'll go with the one because I think that's the most important. Actually, you know what, Mel? No, I'm going to throw you to the wolves, man. I'm going to throw you to the wolves. All right. Okay. So here's two coming, but we'll ask you the one first. If little Mel walked up to Big Mel now and said, "Big Mel, you know why?" What would Big Mel say to Little Mel?
Why?
Mm.
That's a good. Mm. Because the best things aren't always the easy things.
I like it. I like it. Short, concise, poignant, and you know what? Not just for business people, but creators out there as well. It's got a really nice round off to it, that mate. You're 100% correct because you're right, and perfect. I think that's perfect, man. Nicely done. I was expecting a little bit longer there, but you know, you rounded it out really, really sweetly. So it's there we have it, and concisely, and I like it. I liked it. All right. So Mel, for anyone that's going to be listening and or watching this, past, present, future, in 2D, 3D, 4D, 5D, whatever Ds you're talking about, whatever parallel universe you are in, mate, where is Impact Comics for people? Where can they come and see you? Can they bring you a coffee with soy milk from time to time? You know, like and drop things off to you. You know, like you know, where you at in that city there in Canberra, ACT?
So yeah, we're on Ngunnawal country in Canberra. We're in Garema Place, like right in the city, right in the middle of the city. At the moment, you just sort of follow the jackhammer noise. Where they've knocked a building down nearby pretty recently, and they're trying to build a hotel. But yeah, so so Garema Place is where you'll find us. If you see the gaming shop, or you see good games, or Land Speed Records, you're probably in the right area. And we're open 7 days. And we're online as well. We mail order anywhere. And like I say, I reckon at the moment we've got Grace and Katie working the counters most of the time. I'm usually on the counter. Cam's sometimes on the counter. Cam's the true alchemist who works out the numbers to order stuff, and then I work out how to pay for it. So
well,
so yeah, Cam's honestly smashing the really hard work secretly out from the cave out the back, working magic with the numbers on ordering and quantities and stuff for most stuff. But yeah, you can come and find us. We're there 7 days a week. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And bring me a coffee. Yeah, I'm usually in the afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you know, like soy milk, we did say, yeah, like it's not going to be.
It doesn't matter either way. I'll drink either. You know.
Okay. All right. No, and maybe a Phantom comic. You know, like just to take you back.
I'll hook you up with a Phantom comic. Yeah. Yeah. Full circle now. Yeah.
Sounds pretty good to me, you know. Yeah, that's beautiful. All right. Well, Mel, mate, thank you for being part of Chinwag. And it was really awesome to meet you and have a chat to you tonight, man. I've enjoyed that.
It's been great.
I've enjoyed it immensely. I'm glad you did as well. So, mate, hang around after the credits go up, and we'll have a little, you know, like quick chat at the end and a debrief.
Yeah.
But just one thing, everyone that's watched this show knows that I always like to say at the end is mental health is a really important thing in comics. There's a lot of people suffer difficulties with it. I am one of those people that's gone through my own difficulties of it. in the past and very recently, and continue to battle on, but do the best I can, meeting awesome people like Mal and with community members and stuff that I enjoy being friends with and knowing. So if you haven't heard from someone in a while, you're thinking about them, don't delay, just send them a text, say g'day, just check up on them, and like put a smile on their dial. They're probably okay, but it doesn't hurt just to reach out and say g'day to someone that every now and then, and keep an eye on your brothers and your sisters out there and look after each other. So as I always say, it's Chinwag is and always will be made with love, and community is unity. And thank you for watching and all the support, and we will see you again next Tuesday night. So thank you very much. Take care.
This show is sponsored by the Comex Shop. Check out comex.cx for all things Comex and find out what Comex is all about. We hope you enjoyed the show.